Hello and welcome to another episode of What to Watch Today at reinvent. And also let's talk about everything else that gone yesterday in reinvent. This is a kind of daily stream. Well, not daily, it's happened 3 times a week where I invite different guests to come to my channel and chat about the sessions that they are really interested in and also the announcements that were made in reinvent. Today, we have a really cool guest. I'm super happy to have Ant Stanley here and bring him to the stream. Hello.
Hello.
One of our serverless heroes, and I let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ant Stanley. I'm a AWS serverless hero. I help run the the serverless user group in London. I'm also one of the co-founders of Serverless Days. So I help run part of the team that runs Serverless Days London and Serverless Days Virtual, and I'm part of the kind of global organizing team of Serverless Days. So if you've been to Serverless Days, I hope you all have. I'm involved in that organization, but there's independent organizers in every single Serverless Days. My day job, I run a small kind of online training site called Homeschool. Check it out, homeschool.dev. We've got some serverless training. It's all mentored training, cohort-based, so you're not stuck by yourself doing kind of self-paced training. So if you do get stuck, there are excellent instructors, and all of our instructors are AWS heroes as well. So go check out homeschool.dev.
You have John Q there, don't you?
Yeah, he's running a course with us in January. It's the 3rd course he's running with us. And
nice.
Those normally sell out because we limit the space at like 50 or so people. And we have a Discord channel, and the conversation is really good, and Jan's really active in that. So I think that's one of our big, like when you do, from doing a lot of online training, a lot of folks do self-study, and that works for a lot of folks. But the problem with like self-study, you buy something in Udemy, for example, for $10, and you buy it because it's cheap at the time it's on sale, and you forget about it. And then a year later, you've got this course you've never done.
How many?
Right. And then if you do it, you're then stuck. You get to a point where, I don't know how to get past this thing. And, there'll be an online forum and someone might answer it to you. But like if it's a course with 200,000 people on it, the chance of the instructor ever getting back to you is very small. So, we just thought, like, how do we get around that problem? And so the instructors there, we try and get people who are absolute experts in their field. It does cost a little bit more because instructors dedicating time to do that. So it doesn't scale as well as something like a Udemy thing does. We're never going to teach hundreds of thousands of students, but it'll be in the tens and hundreds. We just try to know, how can we do things differently, because there's lots of platforms out there like that. So
and I think it's
also completely serverless.
Good to innovate, because the online education, as you say, it's really good, but I think it's still in diapers. There's so many things that we can try to make it better.
Yeah, exactly. So reinvent.
So what you're missing from Las Vegas? Are you like having some, oh man, I would love to be walking in those smelly casinos?
Oh yeah, I miss the casinos. No, for me, it's definitely meeting people. Like hanging out at Denny's at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. with the rest of the European crew, or whether it's going to the elite coffee shop, and just like seeing Corey Quinn walk by and just shouting out, "Hey, Corey!" and he comes and talks to you for 15 minutes and you never stop laughing. Or seeing AWS product managers sitting next to you, pretending to be incognito so you don't bombard them with questions.
Or having a random lunch at the Venetian, you walk alone and then you sit in a table and you start speaking with some random person, and that random person is super interesting. And I miss the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I miss it's the people that make reinvent. I think definitely in the serverless community, what people don't realize is that reinvent is the biggest serverless conference in the world. I know it's a cloud conference, a lot more than serverless, but it's got the most number of serverless sessions out of any conference,
and it's growing every year. What Andy was saying yesterday, that half of the things that go to AWS are Lambda functions nowadays. It's like crazy. Like half of the compute is Lambda functions. Yeah, and in the chat, let me know if you've been in reinvent or not, or if you have any questions for us. Tell us about your favorite launch. And that's my next question for Ant. What was your favorite announcement?
My favorite, the one that I'll actually use, is actually the increased capacity on Lambda functions. So that's what I'll use. Yeah, fat Lambda. You can have
for what you will use it?
I've got a few things. I'm actually going to try to do a demo project after this. So one of the things so I'm Node.js dev, use a lot of Node. Node.js introduced a feature called workers in Node 10, which essentially allows you to spawn additional processes. So it's a way to get multi-threading working in Node. And I've used it in projects that run like CLI tools and that run on my laptop, but never really used it in Lambda because Lambda only had 2 threads, maximum at any point in time. Now you can go up to 6, so it might actually be useful. So I've got a few projects with workers that I want to try and transfer to Lambda, and it's been a feature from Node 10, and Lambda you can now run Node 12. So yeah, it'll be there. So that's something I want to play with and see how that goes, and see if I can migrate some things into Lambda because of that. Yeah, so that's actually strange. And then also you'll be able to cache a little bit more. Not that caching is a great strategy in Lambda because they don't last so long. But yeah, you can do. I think it definitely opens up the use cases for Lambda, and then definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the cool things I saw also with the pre-announcements of Lambda, that support for, I'm very bad with chip names, but it's this other like more powerful compute type that now you can do like performance, like image creation, and it's way performant. I'm very bad with acronyms, so don't test me on that.
Yeah, it was, it's an extended instruction set.
Exactly,
and it gives you, now use SIMD commands.
So it's not like general computing anymore. You can do a little bit more complex things, and then also adding the elastic file storage and all these kind of extra things that allows you to really play with Lambda in all these use cases that we were saying that at the beginning when we started. Lambda cannot work for machine learning, and Lambda cannot work for this, and Lambda cannot like have storage, and now they keep on adding crazy things. Somebody's asking, Coding Expedition is asking how fat a Lambda can be now. So I think we are talking about memory fat.
Yeah. So it's 10 gigs of RAM and up to six CPUs.
Yes.
6 CPUs, 10 gigs of RAM. Yeah, I think so. Actually, it's a kind of fortuitous. You're talking about machine learning workloads now. So with the fat Lambdas plus the extended instruction set, you've got so. Being a Node.js JavaScript dev and looking at what happens and which is majority, it's the biggest community of developers out there. Python's also big, Java's also big, but JavaScript in particular is the biggest community. And what happens now? So in September, Tensorflow Js, which is a JavaScript implementation of TensorFlow, started to support WASM backend, so WebAssembly backend. So previously it was JavaScript. So yeah, from TensorFlow 2.3, I think 2.7, TensorFlow JS 2.3 supports WASM backend. Then I think it was end of September, the V8 team, who have a WASM runtime in V8, started to support SIMD instructions. And then in October, that version of V8, the first version of V8 that supported SIMD, went live in Node 15, so end of October. And now you've got us in November with SIMD instruction set being available in Lambda functions. So you can run WASM-backed TensorFlow JS in your Lambda functions, and they'll be conservatively, if I do my math right. So when TensorFlow JS introduced the WASM backend, they went up to between, I think, 1.7 times to 4.5 times faster. And then WASM in V8 with introduction of SIMD instructions went another, I I think it's like 4.5 to 7.5, no, 2.5 to 7.5 times faster. So in theory, if you've been running TensorFlow JS in a Lambda function in August, if you're trying to run it now with the same CPU and memory usage, it'd be 10 times faster.
Yeah.
If you're running the latest versions, in theory. And then you can obviously they've tripled the resource allocation. So in theory,
that's
maybe 30
impressive.
times faster.
That's pretty impressive.
So
but the whole Lambda whole thing is like, if you look at benchmarks for like 3 years ago and you look at now, it's just like it's just changed so much. Damian is saying that he just found out that I'm from Uruguay. Yes, I'm from Uruguay, living in the North Pole in Finland next to Santa Claus. And then James is asking if there is any enhancements to AWS Amplify. And that's my favorite announcement from yesterday. If you don't know, Amplify launched a new feature called the admin UI. It was not mentioned in Andy's keynote, but it was. I wrote the blog post, so I was super excited to to be able to write that blog post. I will let you the link in the comments. And that's a great tool. It allows people with no AWS experience or even AWS account to create Amplify projects. So you can have in your team, for example, one person that creates the Amplify project and then gives everybody access to the admin UI, all the client developers, even the content managers, and then they can do the data modeling, add the authentication, all. This will generate AWS resources in the backend. So when you add authentication, you will define, okay, I want a login with a username and a password, and the password needs to have these requirements, and then it needs to be validated in this way and that in the background will create a Cognito resource. And then when you create a data model, that will create whatever Dynamodb table, maybe it creates an Elasticsearch index, it will create a GraphQL, it will create all these resources, and you can basically just drop boxes and fill like forms, and it's so easy to use. So it's one of my favorite announcements because I'm always excited about these things that really lower the barrier to access the cloud. And it has this other side that I think is very excited as a lazy developer as I am. It has the content management part. So, for example, how many times it happens that you make a website and then it's like, yes, now I have the user experience. It works really nice. Oh, shit, I need to make an admin interface so I can add the content. Oh, well, I will edit it in the database. I'm too lazy.
Yeah.
So Amplify now has that, so it has a really nice user experience for you don't have to write the admin UI.
Yeah, so. I can completely relate to that. Yeah, that's an awesome announcement. I think one of the challenges folks sometimes have with AWS, it can be very daunting. It's huge. And yeah, so having a way for your average developer who's just trying to get a website live, and they don't want to learn everything about it, that's awesome.
And all this is using Amplify. So at the end of the day, it's all creating infrastructure as code. Everything is creating CloudFormation. So if you ever want to grow this project and to have a proper backend team that understands this, whatever is coming out from Amplify, you can grow out from Amplify and move to other AWS tools that maybe are better suited for a more mature company or project. But if for startups and like starting your own project, or even companies that wants to do prototyping or do some marketing campaign that is very punctual and don't need to have a kind of very complex thing, I think Amplify is like amazing because it's building on AWS resources, so it can scale.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like I've done a lot of work previously in various innovation labs where there's a desire to get an MVP to market and a test concept before you build it out. But the worry always is you build this thing that, oh bugger, it's going to, if it does take off, you might have to refactor the entire thing.
Exactly.
So where you got something you can then, you build it, it's solid. And then if you do need to extend it and add other things to it, you can do that. That's pretty.
Yeah, and you can even, if you build that's one of my favorite things from Amplify, that you can always build the client and integrate it with the backend that Amplify builds, but then you can detach it in any moment and build the resources with like a proper backend team that does all the complex things that backend teams does, and then attach it with the same. You don't need to change your client. It's just changing maybe the config file in the middle, and it just works. So I think it's one of my favorite services, Amplify, because I'm a frustrated front-end developer.
So what is it with Andy not putting like AppSync and AWS and Amplify announcements in his keynote? Like AppSync wasn't announced in any keynote in 2017. No. And I'm still baffled at that. It was one of my favorite announcements from that year, and I still don't understand how it did not make a keynote.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But I was waiting for this to be announced in Andy's keynote, and it was not. So I was like, oh, this is such a cool announcement. But well, let's talk about the announcements that at least I think it broke a little bit the internet when it came out. That is Proton.
Yeah.
When they announced it, everybody was like, what? What is your take on Proton? I know you have one.
So one of the cool things one of the things I actually do like about the being virtual is when a product gets announced, you can go and use it immediately. So, it's not always there in the search bar, but like if typically you can just add console.aws.amazon.com and put / product name, and you can go to it. So I did that with Proton. It's like, let me start playing around with this thing, because at a high level, it sounds great. It's kind of opinionated deployment platform built for containers and serverless, and it's a way to enable multiple teams to deploy and all these things. The reality is not so great. The user experience needs work. Look, it is preview, so it is definitely something that will improve. Yeah. It's in preview, don't go live in it.
And also for whoever tested, give feedback. As Ant already engaged with the product team, like be verbose, because AWS loves feedback. So be honest, if you don't like something, now is the right time to complain.
Yeah, definitely when the product's early in its development.
Exactly.
So I think Proton could be huge, because it can, obviously I've seen hundreds of serverless talks, and like you see how enterprises work, and they do their CI/CD pipelines, particularly agile ones using serverless. You'll these enabled teams, but you could have some level of compliance and control and governance around how they deploy to make sure every single deploy meets a certain standard. And theory Proton will enable that, but it's how it does it that needs a lot of work.
I think the idea is really cool, because I didn't got to try it yet. And when I was like watching it, I was like, oh yeah, it's so needed, something in there to put order in the chaos, because when you're working in a microservice like organization, either everybody does their own thing, or then there is a lot of checklists and processes that are very like people need to enforce in a way, but it's just like, I think Proton, if they make it to work properly, it will be really cool that there's a platform team that they define everything, and then developers can just use their favorite template. But
exactly. I think that's where there's one of the biggest challenges with Proton is not enough documentation how to create templates. Creating templates is not easy. If they created a tool, to help you easily create templates, or a wizard or something, that would be better. But that bit's, and there's 2 default templates. It's going to need a lot of work. So play with it. Give them feedback. They need the feedback, and maybe in 8-9 months' time, it'll start to live up to its billing, and we'll be here in a year's time saying how amazing Proton is and everything.
And I think one of the things, at least, that we were discussing before is that this is for big teams. If you're doing it for yourself, it might feel very overwhelming to do all these definitions just to do hello world in Lambda functions, because you really need to do a lot of heavy lifting to create all these templates and things like that. But the idea is that after, at least this is the idea, after you have defined everything, then everything is ready for like be super easy for developers. So you need these two sides, like the platform team and the developers. And if you are all the same person, it might feel very, I think, tiring.
Yeah.
But there is a session on Proton, so today.
Yeah, there is, I think.
So I will put the link in the screen so people can go and check it out. Because
it's at 4:30 GMT. I don't know what time that is for everyone else, but no, it's 4:30 my time in GMT.
Everything goes repeat 3 times. So I think the link I have is for the Americans, or at least the first one that appears. But if there is an EMEA session, and then there will be Asia Pacific, or the other way around, and then they will be on demand on Friday. So after the talks all go live in their own schedule, on Friday, they will all appear in the platform for you to watch whenever you want. So the link is there, and the code, this EMB008 is the name, and you can find the free sessions with the same code. So you can just search with that. And for everybody that is interested in the talks, we are recommended. They're all listed in this link that is in the screen. So you can go there, and after we finish this stream, recommending sessions, I will add all Ant's sessions there and also my sessions. So feel free to check that document out. But yeah, Proton is. Somebody said if there is a way to rewatch Andy keynote, not until Friday. So you need to wait until Friday. So at least I could not rewatch it today because it was still replaying in Europe. But maybe tomorrow, I think on Friday, everything that went this week will go on demand. So.
I'm a little sad the keynote wasn't on YouTube, unless it was on YouTube, because my TV has a YouTube app, and I like to watch these kind of keynotes on my TV or on my little monitor. But it's fine.
Yeah, this year it was only on the reinvent platform. Everything, I think it's online, so it's good to keep people in one place and not to distribute the audience in Twitch and YouTube. And in the previous, it was everywhere because you had to go to a physical place to see the whole event. So this year you need to register to reinvent to see the whole episodes and all the talks. So if you have not registered, you still can. And then I want to mention a couple more Lambda launches that at least made me excited, or made a lot of people excited. That the first one is the 1 millisecond billing granularity. I think that's something people were always complaining, like, my function executes in 7 milliseconds and I'm paying all this extra money to AWS. So I think now that's solved. You are billed in 1 millisecond increments. So that's the more granularity that I think you will get. And that's pretty amazing. And as we were chatting before starting the stream, I think with this and the synchronous express workflows, now you can do really crazy things like like Lambda functions can do one thing and one thing only, and you're built exactly by that. And then you can knit them together. And so
I wonder how it will impact architectures, because as you mentioned before, people have optimized their serverless architecture for Lambda billing, and people always do that. Doesn't matter if it's Lambda. You always optimize what you're building, to get the best price. And now that if you had 2 or 3 pieces of logic in one function, just to optimize billing, you can now split them out, potentially. It'll be interesting to see how much. I think folks who are running huge numbers of functions, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of invocations a minute, a day, whatever, they'll go and change things very quickly. The majority of us, maybe your new ones, your new functions, you'll start to do some of those optimizations.
But I think for organizations that are using Lambda intensively, that will be a huge save for whatever they are doing, because it's quite a big difference from 100 milliseconds to 1 millisecond billing granularity.
Yeah, definitely for the folks who are running kind of synchronous kind of web-facing Lambda functions, which are always really short invocations. The folks doing data transformation, where it's like a 5-minute invocation,
nothing changed.
yeah. Not really a huge difference.
And the last Lambda announcement I would like to talk is the container image support.
Yeah.
What is your think? What you think about that?
I think that's a huge announcement. But it's a strange one because obviously I've seen lots of serverless heroes talking about it, and a lot of the consensus among serverless heroes is it's good, but don't change what you're doing.
No.
And in my mind, it's like, which is correct, but it's also, it's not for us. It's not for the folks who've been using serverless, from day one. It's not for us with 4 or 5 years experience using Lambda. It's for the folks who've already have this container Docker-based tool chain, who are very comfortable in that and know that world. Is to give them an easy step into serverless world.
And I think one of the hardest things maybe to teach these people that even you can put a Docker container is it's still event driven. So it's not that it's just an application running inside a Lambda function. No, you need to have an endpoint and it needs to trigger and it does something and it returns and it still has the same type of life cycle that Lambda, that everything is stateless. And so I think there will be a lot of education needed to, now we got the technology closer to people that maybe are not familiar with event-driven development and the stateless development, but then we need to really teach them how to do these things.
Yeah, exactly. Like architecturally, it doesn't change anything in the way you design your apps, and how your services interact, but it does impact your tool chain and how you get that code into the cloud.
Exactly.
And for the folks, you're going to see more and more folks who've got this investment in container tool chains will start using Lambda, and then you'll get this very, I think maybe that's part of the idea behind Proton as well. I think we'll get to this place where most folks' new apps are all going to be serverless, whether you put your stateful stuff in Fargate and your stateless stuff in Lambda, and then maybe after a while you realize that actually half the stuff that's stateful doesn't need to be stateful. It can actually be rewritten as a stateless way, and you start to move more and more. But if you don't have to change your tool chain, that becomes a lot easier. You don't need to learn different tools on your laptop. It becomes significantly easier.
Yeah, I know, but it's just, let's see, I'm very interested on what people build, because I think Lambda is now becoming like one of these staples in AWS. Like first it was like an outsider, and it was like, but now it's getting all these features, and it's and I think people can be very creative. So let's move a little bit to the recommendations. That's what we are here for. What is your top recommendation? What people should watch?
Top recommendation. Oh, this is a hard one. If I had to choose number one. So now you've made me think. So I think ones that people should watch, if is where's it gone? It's Adrian Ayer's session.
Adrian Cockcroft.
No. Oh, sure. No, Adrian's is the other one from AJ. Oh, is it not on my list? Okay, yeah, Adrian as well.
All of them.
all of them. No, so Adrian Cockcroft's is always a huge session. It's architecture trends and topics. The first time I ever heard the word cloud native was from Adrian. I think in a 2011 blog post. I've been reading his blog for years, long before he joined AWS, when he was at Netflix. I know Adrian, I've met him a few times now through the service community. That session is going to be awesome.
That's in my top as well.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a session to watch. That's in like 2 weeks' time or something, though.
Yeah, it's at the end of the conference, but I think it's one of those type of leadership sessions, I will say, that it's like...
I think it's a session that has to be at the end of the conference, because if you try to have it up front without any of the product announcements, it's not really going to have that impact, Whereas if it's at the end, you can talk about stuff that's been announced, you can talk about the future roadmap and what these things are going to enable. I think that'll give you a lot of context.
You have a troll.
I do.
Serverless land. Yeah. For the guys watching, if you don't know Serverless Lands, that's the YouTube channel through the developer advocates from Serverless, and they're also doing some kind of daily stream and random hours. So go and check them out. They have the the list there available, and they're very educational.
Yeah. I'm actually talking about that. I'm wondering, like, out of all the recommended sessions, I don't think any of them. No, I think the Serverless LAMP stack session with Ben
That's
Smith
Ben,
is probably the only. Yeah, that's the only one from the Serverless developer advocates you should bother watching. The rest aren't that. I'm joking. No, it sounds strange, but like I actually don't. I do enjoy it, but like I prefer to watch sessions, either like serious deep dive sessions, so the builders library sessions, or something like Rick Houlihan's sessions. I look for the 400s, or I enjoy watching end user sessions. I think end users give you a lot more of a real world perspective. There's always what the blog post says the service is going to do, and then what it does in reality, and what the edges are, and you get a lot of that in those end user sessions. So I think they're
I love seeing customers speaking, and from the builders library there is a couple of talks today, so I can put them already in the chat. One is from Claire Lingury, and she's talking about delivery pipelines at Amazon, and I think that's going to be really interesting. She's really good, and I always enjoy watching her. Last year she was talking about CI/CD for container apps, and now she's talking about the Amazon delivery software delivery strategy. So I think that will be an interesting one, and it's happening today. So that's one.
Yeah.
And then there is another one from, it's called Building Technology Standards at Amazon Scale. And it's talking about like how Amazon does like all this scaling of the systems, and how they find the balance, how they started adopting Rust, for example, for some of their services. So
is that the Mark Brooker session? I think it is.
It's the Builders Library. I didn't grab the name, but yeah.
Yeah, and also the Builders Library, they're doing Q&As, and there's an email address. I saw I follow most of the folks who contribute to the Builders Library on Twitter, and they put an email address up. I can't remember what it is, that you could email them with questions. Hang on, I'll see if I can find it.
Nice.
Joe, I can't even pronounce his surname. Joe, that's not Magaro. Anyway, Joe Magaro Magaramov, that's it. He put it up in the email. I'll find out what it is. Oh yeah, so if you go builders-library-questions@amazon.com, you can you can ask questions during the Builders Library session.
Yeah, and all the sessions that are going live in the America time zone, they also have Q&A that you can do. So that's something pretty nice, that if you have any question and you're watching it on the right time, then you can always ask. And here I will put the tweet that you just share with the email, so people can go and ask. What other sessions you have in your recommendations?
So it's not a Builders Library session, but the Mark Brooker Serverless Security and Governance session, best practice for security governance and serverless applications. I think that's pretty useful, because you see more and more folks using Lambda in secure and compliant environments. So that's pretty important. If you're working in finance, or you're working in healthcare, or you're working card payments, PCI DSS, anything like that, that's a really good session. And actually any session by Mark is normally pretty good, because he's one of the engineers building Lambda. So it's you get a good idea of what's under the hood, and you'll go into detail. So I think that's another great session if you're in that space.
Yeah, the security sessions, I think they're going to be very interested. They are in my list as well. But all these are for the last week. So I think the serverless developers, we will be very interested in the last weeks watching all the content.
Yeah. I think this week the sessions, the one today is the Dynamodb session. That's the one to watch today.
That's a Rick Houlihan one?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a classic. If you don't know about that session, is Rick Houlihan is the kind of one of the principals. He's not the developer advocate, but he's kind of technologist, I think he called himself. And every year for the last 3 or 4 reinvents, he's been doing this Dynamodb advanced modeling patterns. And I watched it when I was in the middle of my migration, when I was working in the customer. I think it was the first time he was doing that session. And it blew my mind. I was doing Dynamo so wrong. I arrived to work the next day. I was like, let's throw everything to the trash. Let's start again. We are doing things here very, very wrong. I really don't know how this works.
Yeah, it's a great session. I was in it last year, and then I think I've watched it 3 or 4 times.
Oh,
on
you watched
YouTube
it live last year? That's
I
nice.
watched it live last year. Absolutely, it's mind blowing. You're just like, ooh.
But you cannot stop him and rewind him in live.
No, I still bits of it I don't fully understand. The single table design is pretty awesome. There are some caveats to that. If you don't know what your data access patterns are and you're still trying to figure all of that out, don't do it. Because to re-architect a single table can be quite painful. But yeah, if you've got an existing application that you need to drive more performance out of and you need to drive the cost down, go and watch it. Your app will run faster, run cheaper. It's great, and once you get it, like you suddenly go, okay, I understand this,
and even if I don't do single table design all the time, but I like to think about some of those patterns and things that he mentioned in the talk, and it really helped me to understand how Dynamo worked, because before that I was just thinking like, you throw things, you get things. That was kind of my understanding of Dynamo before watching that talk some years ago.
I completely agree. Like, even if you aren't going to do single table design, understanding how it works. Like, for example, I used to do really big items in Dynamo. It's like, no, don't do that. Make it small, because if you need to update, one field in that item in Dynamo, it rewrites the whole thing. So it's a lot of IOPS, So smaller, make everything smaller chunks.
But I think it's so normal if you're coming from MongoDB to throw the whole document. So we were doing the same as well at the beginning, like throwing things in there. And it's just, Dynamo is a monster by itself, and you need to learn it. And at the moment you learn it, you fall in love with it. At least that's my experience with Dynamo. I cannot use any other database, at least for doing applications, since I discovered how to do Dynamo properly. It's just so easy and it's so fast. And setting it up is like so simple. You don't need to worry about spinning. Even the Aurora serverless still has some hassle of configuration. Dynamo doesn't. So
I had that moment first time I ever used Dynamo, going, okay, I was on the console. It's about 6-7 years ago, and I clicked go to DynamoDB, create table. I was like, oh, is that it? Is there anything more I need to do? It's like, okay, you create your table, and then you've got your IAM policy and your roles defined. You can access it and write to it. It's like, okay. Nothing else. Well, and then you get more advanced. You got to start understanding indexes and all of that. But to get up and going is incredibly easy. Actually, on that, what do you think of Particle? You need query language for Dynamo.
I don't know. I think it's cool to be able to access your Dynamo in different ways, but I don't know if I think I have not tried that. So I have not real hands-on experience, but I'm very afraid of the scams and how, if you are using it for something that is asynchronous and it's on the side and it's maybe for collecting data to create something that is not user facing, I think that's okay. That's great, but don't do it in the customer facing applications. That's also my same take with AppSync. They do like magic with Dynamo, that sometimes they do just scans instead of using the secondary indexes. So it's like, I think in some point you need to tweak and learn a little bit the platform to get the best performance of it. But I'm always open for more ways to accessing things, because people have so many different needs, and what I need, I don't need Particle. It's not maybe what other people are really needing, and I think it will enable a lot of really interesting use cases. For example, I think the there was an announcement yesterday for Glue Elastic Views or something like that is called. That's using particle to grab information from Dynamo and transform it into elastic search indexes and things like that. And I imagine they will add more sources and targets later on, but like that type of tooling is pretty interesting. Like it will allow you, before, if you wanted to transform from Glue, from Dynamo to Elastic, you need to have like Dynamo streams and had a Lambda, and like now this is just a view that happens, and like whatever you update in one place, it will distribute everywhere. And so I think that's kind of use case is pretty cool for Particle and for Dynamo, and this is not something that it's like API gateway connected to that thing. So it's for bigger use cases, and so in that sense I think it's pretty cool, the Particle.
Yeah, it will be. I don't know if I'm going to use it because I don't know, maybe it is a bit Stockholm syndrome because I'm used to the filter expression syntax and the query expression syntax and all of that. And most of the stuff I do is puts and gets anyway. I think 80% of what I use Dynamo for is like a key value store.
Exactly.
So we'll see. I've always pushed stuff to Athena if I want to do more complex queries, that kind of thing. So we'll see. But I do think the Glue Elastic view thing was interesting because it could potentially, I need to look at it in more detail, but it could potentially enable more like CQRS type workflows and event sourcing type workflows. You write your data in one place, you read it from another place, that kind of thing. You separate your reads and your writes. It could enable new architectures or make those architectures easier to build. That could be quite interesting.
And I think it's quite normal nowadays that we have all these microservices with their own databases, and then if we need to aggregate those data, then it's like, well, we need to build more APIs, and then we need to build more layers. So it's like with the monolith, everything was more easy, but it was like, everything has a trade-off. So I think this Glue will help maybe to put all the data kind of in one view that then you can use it for something else. Maybe you cannot write there, but at least you can read. So,
well, that's it. Most databases actually have significantly more reads than writes. People want to access information in an aggregated way. So that's I think it's not something people have built their own solutions to do this. Now it's just like, okay, well, here's something out the box. It's easy to configure. There's CloudFormation behind. I haven't checked if there's CloudFormation. I hope there's CloudFormation behind it. When is AWS going to start releasing products with CloudFormation as their standard?
Well, I think because of the way AWS does things, CloudFormation needs to wait for a little bit, because the moment that they put something in CloudFormation, people use it. So it's good that when things are in preview, they are not CloudFormation supported yet, because things change a lot. So if you get too attached to your CloudFormation, maybe you will end up throwing it to trash 5 seconds later. And from databases, I think one of the launches that broke a little bit the internet was the serverless Aurora version 2. That looked very like dark magic. I have not gotten into that, but it really looked that dark magic how that is going.
That looks good. I think if we can see, I don't know if it's coming. You just have to blink if it's coming or not. I'm joking. Don't do that. But if I'd love to see Aurora support in AppSync, because I know it's a huge request from a lot of folks to have a relational database, because most folks are used to comfortable using relational databases, and you don't necessarily need an NoSQL database. Particularly if you've got a small app, you definitely don't need it. But you also have the issue where you don't know how big this thing's going to scale, and the serverless paradigm. But
I think now with serverless version 2 is maybe Aurora version 2 is possible, because it has really crazy weird scalability. Like, I don't know what they're doing there. It's just, at least when Andy was sharing it, I was like, wow, this looks crazy.
It's one of those things where there's clearly a lot of work has happened under the hood, but like the interface hasn't changed. You don't. That's actually one of the great things. The interface hasn't changed. It supports MySQL. The other big announcement I really liked yesterday was the Babelfish announcement.
That's an interesting one. Do you want to explain what is Babelfish a little bit?
Yeah, so it's like an interface that allows you to present Microsoft SQL Server queries, and it's essentially a Microsoft SQL Server interface for PostgreSQL.
For Postgres, so you can migrate your SQL Server databases into Aurora.
Yeah, exactly. In a previous life, about 15 years ago, I'm old. I used to be a Microsoft SQL Server DBA. I'm certified. Certified. Well, the certification is probably expired, but a Microsoft SQL Server DBA, and it's a great platform, but it's an expensive platform. You know, it's gotten more expensive.
There's a session of that coming today, so.
Yeah, so I'll be super interested. Just it's not something I use today, but it will be something I'll be interested to watch, just to see how it works. You know, will you be able to plug in your SQL Server tools into it? You know,
you should check it out.
Really interesting. Yeah, I think the other big thing about it is that it's going to be open sourced.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So you don't need to do it only for Aurora. Maybe you can do it for like whatever RDS, or if you have even your Postgres in your instance or on premise, or so.
I wonder how many folks who are not using AWS are going to. That GitHub repo is going to be interesting to watch. Like you're going to see a lot of requests coming and a lot of people testing it. I think that's a super interesting project and announcement, because it could save loads of folks a bunch of money. And I think because this will be open source, I think the adoption is going to be huge beyond just AWS. Yeah,
I hope, because I think those like being able to migrate from things like are really expensive to open source project is always good.
Oh, definitely. I remember. I was saying just on the service side, I remember how we talked earlier about how people architect to optimize their price, and I just remember like definitely SQL Server, you architect to optimize your price. Like you own more cores because they're different pricing models, and so painful.
It brings you some memories from the past.
The long past that I've almost forgotten, not quite yet.
Do you have some other must-watch talks in your list?
I think probably the non-serverless one is architecting.
Doesn't need to be serverless. It can be any.
No, it doesn't have to be. Yeah. I was going to say there's an architecting sustainable solutions and AWS session that I think is also in 2 weeks' time. When it's 15 days time. Yeah, so it's December the 17th.
So on December the 17th, you will be very busy.
Yes, I'll be watching a lot of sessions. It's an interesting one. I'm quite interested in sustainability, and I'd want to see AWS improve its sustainability. I do understand that it's significantly more sustainable running within the cloud than on-prem. Lambda itself is significantly gives you significant improvements on that, because your functions only run for the time, or they're only alive for I think 20-30 minutes even when they're not running. So they massively improve efficiency of the underlying usage. So Lambda functions are more energy efficient overall. But I'd love to see the full roadmap of how AWS is going to move to being completely sustainable, carbon neutral, renewable energy. So I'm really interested to see that. I followed that for a while. I know a few regions are there already. So that's more like what's the bigger impact of AWS on the world, and how they see themselves. And so that's a session I'm super interested in as well. So how do you be more sustainable? And I'd love to see what AWS's roadmap on that as well.
That's really cool. I will add that one to my list, because this is kind of how I do it. I learn sessions from my guests and then I add them to my list. I have a couple of serverless sessions to recommend. Cool. That are very serverlessly. One is with step functions, that is getting started with step functions. Gabe Holland is giving it. He's one of the developer advocates in my team, and he's great. And he's going to talk with a customer on how they are using step functions. So this is an introduction session. If you want to get started with step functions, I think it's a great one. And then there is a similar one for Event Bridge. And I think with step functions and Event Bridge, you get these kind of orchestration and choreography patterns that are very popular in serverless. So I think these are two sessions that, if you want to get started on architecting serverless architectures, are quite cool. And then for the ones that wants to get into the leadership sessions, today is the database leadership session. And I think I've never been to a leadership session. Have you been there?
I did the containers and serverless one last year, and I've done the
Okay.
security one a few years ago. The security one is fascinating. Steve Schmidt does it. It's because it kind of goes, it's not just about the security products, like the database ones and the...
It's like a mini keynote,
Yeah, and that goes into depth, and also how AWS secures its own applications and how those are developed, and it was found it absolutely fascinating. And I suddenly felt like, ooh, the stuff I'm deploying is not secure compared to the AWS. Not that what I work is very secure because I rely on AWS, but the amount of security testing that happens before anything goes live, that's fascinating. And the amount of work AWS puts into that. And a lot of it's under the covers that you're not aware of. So that's the Steve Schmidt session, that's one of my favorite keynote sessions.
I think the leadership sessions are a must, at least for me, because they're usually really hard to get in. And I don't think they have repeats in reinvent. It's something that happens or is limited sitting. If you are not there, you don't fit. And I don't know if they even go to YouTube. So they're like a rare thing. So I think now that they are in reinvent, available for everybody to watch, I recommend it all the time because they are a very interesting set of sessions. And I think they are not filmed. I have not watched one yet because I think they start today with this one. But they are feel more like the Andy Kishasi keynote in a more like studio thing. So it's a little bit more dynamic and more interesting to watch. So I think that will be an interesting, at least for me, I want to watch the database, the serverless, the security, and I think there was other more like, I think the CloudFront, it's not called CloudFront, but it's one of those edge service. I don't know how it's called, but those leadership sessions, at least I'm very interested in. But there is from any topic, there are many of them. So I totally recommend.
Yeah, they're great. I think at the other sessions, I definitely recommend all the end user ones. There's one from Steady, where I'm building the business case. Steady is a weird startup because it's very rare I see a startup where I know half the people that work there because they seem to have hired a whole bunch of serverless heroes. So that'll be an interesting one. The business case of serverless is Steady, which I think is... when is that? Come on. That's also in 7 days' time.
Yesterday was the Lego one.
Lego,
that was really nice. There was Sheen Results, that is a serverless hero, and he will be in this show. I don't know when, I think next week. So I think it was really cool. He was talking on how they use serverless and Lego and how they architected. So if you didn't watch that one, don't worry. It will come back on Friday to be rewatched, so that's fine on demand. But customer stocks, I think they are the most interesting ones, definitely.
Yeah, I think the other one I think to watch is the Liberty Mutual one, which is about building a cloud center of excellence. I'm trying to remember when that is.
That's on 6 days, on the 9th.
And 6 days, on the 9th. Yeah, that's the other interesting one. So between Steady and Liberty Mutual, I think Liberty Mutual have 4 or 5 AWS heroes now. Not just serverless, they've got a data hero, and they've got machine learning heroes. And
a dev tool hero now.
Dev tool hero, that's it, Matt Coulter, so that'll be a good session to watch. I think Lego and Liberty are like 2 kind of big organizations. They're quite very different organizations that have done this transformation. In slightly different ways, but there's definitely common threads. And I think it's good to watch both those sessions because it gives you, if you're a big organization looking to adopt serverless, that gives you a good blueprint on how to do it, from a technical level and an organizational level.
Yeah, and I think because the way that I think Liberty is like an insurance company or something more financial and very regulated, and Lego is Lego. The levels of regulations, that I think that's something also people are very kind of afraid when changing and innovating technologies and things like that. So Liberty Mutual might be a very interesting for banks or people working in a more regulated space. But there's many customer sessions. I think there is this AXA. I don't know how you pronounce it.
AXA,
and I think they're also talking about the migration, and then there is other also migration stories, and I think those are all must watch because they're always fun.
Definitely. I watched one last night with FINRA. So there's a lot of most of the finance track, I think 3/4 of them are serverless in some way or the other. And the film I want to watch last night was they're talking about how they built a serverless data lake, and Lambda was just a little piece of glue in the middle of it.
Yeah,
it's all powered by Athena and a few other things, but yeah, like super interesting. And I always find it interesting how Lambda just ends up being this little piece that seems to get in everywhere.
Yeah, but Lambda, that's the idea. It's like a little thing that you put everywhere that enables you to do a lot of powerful things. It's like, that's what I always say. It's like building Lego towers or something. You have all these, I don't know, S3, Lambda, Dynamo, API gateway, and you pile everything together and you have this massive castle. And it's not like before you have a big EC2 instance that does everything, and now you have all this. There was a thread in Twitter, I think, some time ago, where Jan Q was explaining why the serverless diagrams look so complex, and and it's because it's exposing everything. Before you had this box that has everything hidden, and now the cover is up and all the architecture is exposed, all the different moving pieces. Like Lambda is tiny, Dynamo is tiny, everything.
I think if you ever want to scare someone, there's a tool which visualizes CloudFormation templates. CFNDI. It's I can't remember the name of the guy who does it, but there's a great little tool. You can basically, it's a command line tool, and it'll create a graphic of your CloudFormation template. Do one with an AppSync CloudFormation template, because every resolver is a separate item, separate resource in CloudFormation. So you've got a resolver that's like 10 lines, something of code, of business logic, and suddenly that's a resource. And if you've got a complicated AppSync implementation with 30, 40, 100 resolvers, suddenly this thing looks massive and complicated, and it's not. That's kind of, whereas, if you're writing a GraphQL server, and that would be like visualizing every single little function in the GraphQL server.
But I have to say, wish list for some that they add as API AppSync kind of nice way to do it, because when you are working with serverless framework, it's so easy to do the AppSync. Then you're doing Amplify, it's so easy to do AppSync. You're working with some, and you have to write a CloudFormation thing, and you're like, no. Wish list. If you're watching me, serverless heroes and serverless developer advocates, take the note.
Yes. Definitely. Well, we'll see. I think Sam's had a few improvements. So it's good to see the improvements that are coming through with Sam still in development.
Some is great, but I always want more.
Yeah, definitely.
But we are almost on time, so I want to thank you. And for the people watching, I will update all the talks that Ant mentioned today later in the day in this document. And this document has the talks that we recommend yesterday, and it will have all the talks recommended. So basically at the end of reinvent, it will have the whole reinvent catalog, but what I can do. I want to collect them because yesterday people were asking. So
you should do a follow-up and ask people what were the best talks you actually watched.
I should do that after reinvent. What is the best talks that you watch? I will stream forever. And if you want to connect with us, there is the Twitter. You can follow wrong one there. You can follow Ant in Twitter and also me. And tomorrow we have another guest, and the agenda is available there. So thank you very much, Ant, for your time and the discussion. I always enjoy this. This is my excuse to meet people during reinvent. I should name like that my session, not what to watch today, but the excuse to meet people. Yes. Thank you, everybody watching and Serverless Land. I hope you took the note of my wish list. Yes, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
I don't know where my hand is.